Yesterday afternoon, I filed a lawsuit on behalf of the Bridge Cafe and Bistro, which is a restaurant in they call it Hurricane, but Hurricane, West Virginia, which is in Putnam County, sort of between Huntington, West Virginia, and Charleston, West Virginia, in that area. But we filed a federal lawsuit yesterday afternoon where this restaurant, the owners, we are challenging West Virginia's so-called mask mandate. And we are also challenging the constitutionality of West Virginia's, quote, stay-at-home order. As the federal court in Pennsylvania just 2 days ago ruled, lockdown orders, or call them stay-at-home orders, have no legal precedence in our American legal system. Even though we've had worse pandemics in the past, it's not something that is a part of American tradition or American legal history. And frankly, it's quite scary that the government was able to lock down or, quote, close our economy this quickly and with so much compliance by so many people. So fortunately, I was able to get connected with the owners of this restaurant. And I remember when they had all this social media drama over a Facebook post that they had made. And fortunately, they called me and the stars sort of aligned, and we were able to file a lawsuit for money damages against their county, against the health inspector in the county that had attempted to enforce the mask mandate and retaliate against them, and at the same time to sue the West Virginia governor to challenge the constitutionality of some of these executive orders. We had just got it filed at the very end of the day yesterday, and we just, as of maybe 5 minutes ago, finally got the case number for the case. It's pending in the Southern District of West Virginia, and the case number is 3:20-CV-00611. So that tells me it's the 611th federal lawsuit in the Southern District that's filed so far this year. There already was an interview of my client at his restaurant yesterday, and that was by WSAZ News. Let me see if I can share that.
All throughout our country, including all 3 states in our region. A couple of months back, we told you about a restaurant in West Virginia not complying with the mask mandate, which didn't last long due to the Putnam County Health Department enforcing the executive order. But now, as News Channel 3's Tori Yorkie explains, the owner of the restaurant is taking legal action.
Andrew Stewart owns the Bridge Cafe and Bistro in Hurricane. Over the summer, his reputation for making a memorable meal was eclipsed by a memorable Facebook post when he said that his business would not require masks. And within days, he heard from the Putnam County Health Department. We have no jurisdiction.
So basically, the first count in the lawsuit is for what's called First Amendment retaliation. So this restaurant, when the mask mandate first came out, all the Karens of social media came out and were demanding to know that all of these restaurants were going to be complying with the mask mandate. And the Bridge Cafe and Bistro, which had a big following on social media and was still is a very successful restaurant, they put out this Facebook post. And it basically said that it was their opinion after really thinking about it and discussing it between themselves and their staff that they weren't going to require anybody to wear a face mask if they didn't want to. And following that, there was just all this social media drama where, and I believe, this was WCHS, but there were news stories on this where Putnam County, the secret police of the health department, had told the media that they were going to force them to comply or they were going to shut them down. So this reporter really did a great job, and she's going through sort of some of the background of what happened. This is back when I guess she had interviewed people from Putnam County after the social media post had first occurred.
In-house dining open, employees of restaurants, it's an executive decision from the governor that they wear masks.
Basically, that meant Stewart's employees had to comply with the mask mandate.
The alternative being, they would pull our license to operate as a food establishment.
He says from the very beginning, he feels his rights were violated.
Somebody had actually suggested that we get a hold of Mr. Bryan and see what we could do to pursue this legally. So we did.
We're suing Putnam County for money damages for the violation of civil rights. If it looks like I had been working all day, I had been working all day. I really wasn't expecting to show up on the TV news towards the end of the day. But that was my client, Andrew. And a really funny thing is, and really cool rather than funny, is that he and his wife, Ashley, who is also a plaintiff in the case, they're expecting a child at any moment. And, there's probably some drawbacks about, being a kid who was born in the year 2020. But how cool is it going to be that right around the time that you were born, your parents sued the West Virginia governor to try to preserve the liberty that they would hopefully will have enjoyed, as they grow older. Anyways, I'll continue with the news story. That's for First Amendment retaliation for the fact that they retaliated against this restaurant.
Stewart's attorney, John Ryan, says he filed a federal lawsuit Tuesday evening against Putnam County and the Putnam Health Inspector.
For the fact that they retaliated against this restaurant following this restaurant's expression of their political opinion, their political beliefs on Facebook.
And in addition to that, Brian says they're also suing Governor Jim Justice, saying that the mask mandate and stay-at-home order issued by the governor was unconstitutional and unenforceable.
We just want to make sure that, our voices are heard. We don't believe what's going on is right.
Now, I did speak with the governor's general counsel. He tells me that they have not yet been served with the laws.
All right. Well, yeah, they haven't been served yet because we just got our case number here a few minutes ago. So the next step is we will issue the summonses and get the governor served, and we'll get Putnam County served. So because we have two different categories of defendants, we have probably two different timelines that will occur here. So the 1983 action against the county. Now, when you file a civil rights lawsuit, for instance, if you sue a police officer for excessive force, people don't realize this, but you have to sue the individual. So you have to sue Officer John Doe. Now, the employer police department, 99 times out of 100, if not 100 times out of 100, is going to defend as if they were named, even though they were not, and they're going to pay any verdict or judgment, even though they're not named. So you have to sue individuals. So we had to sue, and we did sue the actual health inspector that showed up and made the threats and forced them to comply with the mask mandate and threatened to close them. So we're suing the county there, the county health inspector, for what's called First Amendment retaliation. So if you post a Facebook post expressing your political speech or any protected speech under the First Amendment, although private citizens can retaliate against you, they can say how awful of a person you are, that nobody should go to your business, that you should feel bad, and that you are bad. But the government can't do that. The government can't retaliate against you based on the content of what you say. They can't take a policy stance. And at this point, we all know that the act of wearing a mask or not wearing a mask has been a political debate, a highly charged political debate for some time. And this was protected political speech. So if somebody goes on Facebook and expresses their political opinions, their beliefs, which occurred in this case, the government can't retaliate against you because the Bill of Rights protects us from government activity, doesn't protect us from corporations or from private citizens or other just guys on Facebook. It protects us against the government. For instance, the county health board. And I talked to a lot of restaurants, and this is the only one so far that I'm aware of that actually took it upon themselves to go out there and literally enforce the so-called mask mandate. Because you know what? In my opinion, it's not enforceable. The governor, I've said this 100 times, but the governor does not get to make West Virginia law. He just doesn't. Our Constitution provides how laws are created, and that is only through the legislature. The legislature has not met since the beginning of the so-called state of emergency. Therefore, there can have been no new laws. There can be no mask law in West Virginia. All we have is an unenforceable piece of paper called an executive order from the governor. And if a county or any government wants to try to enforce that by arresting people or closing their business, then in my opinion, they can be sued for the violation of civil rights. And that's what we're doing. So we're seeking money damages against the county. Now that, just like any civil rights lawsuit, is going to be probably a year-long timeline unless it settles sooner than that. So there's going to be the opportunity for discovery, depositions, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the claims against the governor, which are not for money, they're for challenging the constitutionality of these orders. We would hope that those go on an expedited timeline. And here in a few days, we will ask for a preliminary injunction, for a restraining order to prevent this county from enforcing these unconstitutional and unenforceable mandates. And this is an issue of law, we believe. So we think this is going to get into court much quicker. And we're going to ask for a hearing on this that's going to be on an expedited basis. So these are basically two different timelines within one civil lawsuit. And that was, let's see. Thanks for the comments. I will keep fighting the good fight. Like I said from the very beginning, when the mask mandate was handed down, I said that I have not yet begun to fight, just like Captain John Paul Jones. And, I think there's probably more lawsuits coming. And if you want to read the lawsuit, you can go to, let me bring the other thing off. You can go to thecivilrightslawyer.com. Let me share it. Okay, so this is the website. All right, civilrightslawyer.com. And this is where I posted details on the lawsuit, and you can read the whole thing from within the page right here. So this is it. It's 40 pages long. So you can read all the details, and I lay it out beginning on March 16th, where the governor declared a state of emergency. And isn't it crazy that from March 16th, what is it now? It's now September 16th. Perfect timing. So it's been over half a year since the state of emergency was started. How can it still be an emergency after half of a year? And let's look specifically at Putnam County. They've had 2 deaths attributed to COVID-19 in almost or over half a year of being under a state of emergency. Meanwhile, how many people have died of suicides, of heart disease, of stroke? I laid some of those numbers out here in this lawsuit, and it's just absurd that The restaurants were closed, and we've only had 2 deaths from COVID-19 during this whole time. Meanwhile, people have died of all sorts of other causes: car wrecks, suicides, strokes, heart disease. So why aren't those other causes of death states of emergency? We know the reason to that. That's a rhetorical question, because this has enabled our governors of this country to become tyrants. They become drunk with power. And Jim Justice has become the worst of them. So March 16th, he issued the stay-at-home order, and we hadn't even had one positive case in West Virginia. And I cite at length the Pennsylvania case that you need to read it. It's 66 pages long. It was written by Judge Stickman, who's a recent appointee out of the Western District of Pennsylvania. He was a federal judge appointed by President Trump. And go look at the opinion that this Patriot wrote. If you haven't understood the importance of appointments to the federal judiciary, go read that opinion. It could have read much differently, but it talks about the fact that lockdowns have not been used at all in the history of the United States. It's not something that our country has ever done to our own people. There's no legal precedence for it, for making completely healthy people stay at home as if they're quarantined, and shutting down private businesses, and then having the government come in, or not even the government, just a governor or some secret committee behind him deciding who's essential and who's non-essential. Because we know how that's going to play out. What's going to be essential? Well, maybe the hotel owned by the governor and all the restaurants inside it. Well, all that stuff's going to be essential, of course. Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, all the big corporate donors, they're going to be essential, aren't they? But here we have a mom and pop business or a mom and pop restaurant in a county that has had a nominal impact from COVID-19. So they were forced to close. Nobody could come in and buy food from them, but they could go to Walmart and buy a hairdryer. That's the sort of arbitrary action by government that is unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment due process clause. So we made all these claims in the lawsuit. There's a number of constitutional claims. So as I brought up before, we have the First Amendment. So the First Amendment obviously protects speech. So if you want to get on social media, that absolutely is a platform that's protected under the First Amendment at this point. Thanks to all these lawsuits against Trump by the people who were banned by his Twitter page, our courts have ruled that statements on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever the case may be, they're protected. So if the government takes some sort of adverse action against you, some sort of retaliation against you, then that is going to be a First Amendment analysis. And we all know that this mask thing at this point has become a completely highly charged political issue. In the lawsuit, I cite several recent newspaper articles where it's discussed about the fact that this is an intense political debate going on right now. And really the proof is in the pudding, because you can see in the response to my client's Facebook post, well, you can't really see anymore because their account got deleted. We don't yet know why it got deleted, but they had a big following, but it got deleted. Fortunately, we have all the screenshots. But you can see that it's a highly charged political issue, especially for the people that are watching CNN. I mean, they are convinced that we're in the middle of an apocalypse, and that if you're not wearing a mask, that you're killing everybody. And that is the environment that we find ourselves in. Secondly, we have all these due process violations, which falls under the 14th Amendment. And that's the good old life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Without a doubt, you have a property interest in a business and the right to pursue a business, to operate your business. And the government can't just take that away from you without due process. They can do it under some circumstances, but there has to be due process. Now, what that is, you have to go through a bunch of different court decisions and you have to look at the facts. So here, we didn't go through really any process. We didn't have the legislature meet. We didn't have the legislators discuss these issues with their constituents. All we had was some sort of secret meeting with the governor and probably folks from WVU, who we know is this left-wing organization that is running our, quote, public health policy. And just in social media in the past couple days were pictures of the president of WVU doing as kings usually do. It's do as I say, not as I do. Because he was in a store with no mask on, even though he makes everybody else wear a mask. And it's just typical. You can see the video of Governor Justice when he arrived at the Capitol the other day to a protest of people wanting to be able to play sports or to have their kids play sports. He didn't have a mask on. Of course not. Hey, Trey, how you doing? As well as Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards and the mayor of New Orleans, who refuses to open New Orleans to phase 3 after evidence to do so is shown. Yeah, well, as bad as our governor is, he's not as bad as the Louisiana governor. But the funny thing is the Louisiana governor, when he wants to shut down a business, you know what they do? They take the restaurant to court and they seek a court order to shut them down. So at least they follow a process for which the business owner can hire a lawyer, can participate, is entitled to make their defense in court, to have their day in court, to have their say, and to appeal whatever the decision is. And how do things go down in West Virginia? Well, you had the governor shortly, about the same time this happened, he threatened to have the local county health boards enforce his mask mandate. And that's exactly what, of course, of all the counties that were going to do it, it was going to be Putnam County. And so they basically follow his lead because there's no chain of there's no what's the word I'm looking for? The governor cannot control the county, and the county obviously cannot control the governor because they're separate entities under the West Virginia Constitution. And that's why we have to sue them both separately as well. Let's see, where was I? Why not a habeas due process? Well, it is due process. We're suing for due process, but that doesn't mean a whole lot because you have substantive due process and then you have procedural due process. And if you read the complaint, you'll see that I outline specifically what was violated in procedural due process, which is like a notice and a hearing, and what was violated in substantive due process, which is, the right not to have arbitrary, irrational actions taken. And one of those things is the fact that, when I looked at the numbers, we have 2 deaths in Putnam County in half a year of being in a pandemic. Now, obviously, we don't want anybody to die, and any death is sad, no matter what age they are. But freedom is scary. We can't give up our liberties to government just because we don't want one person to die or we don't want 2 people to die. We can't do that. You can't have freedom and complete safety. There's no guarantee in life. That's why we get in the car every day and drive. We could be dead at any second. Yet we still do it because it's worth the risk. We don't even wear a helmet. We just wear a seatbelt, no helmet. At some point, if the risk is high enough, maybe in the apocalypse, like Mad Max, we'll have spiked shoulder pads and spiked helmets when we're in our vehicles. But the risk hasn't gotten up there yet. The COVID-19 risk still doesn't approach anywhere near what the car accident death risk is. And so if we look at Putnam County, 2 deaths in half a year, Well, we know through the statistics that there have been usually like 5 suicide deaths in that county per year. And so we're not even approaching the suicide, much less heart disease or strokes. So in hindsight, was it justified? No, of course not. So were there hot spots in the state of West Virginia? Yes. But instead of doing like they did in Pennsylvania, which got struck down anyways, instead of going county by county like he's doing now with color coding, as far as restaurants are concerned, he just every restaurant in the state, except probably his own, because they were inside his resort. So he just closed all the restaurants in the county, even though they weren't this hotspot. And so that's an arbitrary action with no rational basis. Instead of closing the restaurants where there was an actual problem, he just closed all of them. I think the whole COVID thing's political. It'll soon be gone when the election is over. Well, that depends on who wins the election, doesn't it? If the Democrats win the election, for sure it'll be gone. I think if Trump wins the election, nothing ever goes away. They'll be trying to impeach him for his response to COVID-19. It'll never go away if Trump wins. The only way it'll go away is if the Democrats win. But then you'd be trading the whole political COVID-19 thing for something much worse. And that would probably be, the end of America as we know it. Deborah, Putnam County must be a scary place to live. The funny thing is that I've met so many people, because if you've watched any of my past videos, I've got a lot of YouTube videos that came out of Putnam County, and I've got a lot of litigation occurring there. But everyone I meet from Putnam County has absolutely been so supportive of most things that I do. And they've been, some of the greatest, freedom lovers that I've ever met. And, I think we're reaching a time to where people are realizing that a lot of their leadership, they don't value the Constitution the same way that we do. And the ironic thing is in Virginia, they've had this awful governor, but you've had these great state sheriffs, these constitutional sheriffs, who have stood up and said, you know what, if we have to, we'll deputize every citizen so that they can carry a gun if the governor tries to stop them from possessing guns. And so you've had these Constitution-loving, constitutional defending sheriffs over there, and you haven't seen any of that really in West Virginia. To the contrary, you've had sheriffs like you have there in Putnam County who are asking for a court to declare AR-15s to be weapons of war. And it's time that people look around and say, wait a minute, if we're going to have a constitutional sheriff, shouldn't we have somebody that doesn't just look out for law enforcement first, but they look out for the constitutional rights of the individual first? But it's been a long time where those issues probably in West Virginia have never really come up. But this is a different time that we're living in, and it's time for people to really vet their local candidates to make sure that they're going to put their constitutional rights first. But other than that, I don't think Putnam County is a scary place to live. Part of the problem probably is that it's a great place to live, because where you have a fair, a wealthier county, you're going to have more affluent people living there. You're going to have less problems, and they can afford to hire more law enforcement officers. But then you have more law enforcement officers who all need something to do. They're going to be more active. And that's just my opinion, my theory, because where I grew up in Florida, it was pretty, it was a pretty nice area. It was a working class county, compared to other Florida counties. But you had thousands of police officers there, and they all needed something to do. So, drive down I-95 and you'll still see what they're doing. They're hiding under the bridges and in the guardrails with radar guns trying to get your ass for speeding. And I mean, that's what a lot of them are doing 24/7. And if they had a bunch of other stuff to do, they wouldn't be doing that. Like here in my little county, it's all they can do to get to a call. And they have all the domestic violence calls way the hell out in the country, and no backup, no radio connection with anybody. And so they don't have time to just be sitting out there hiding in a bush with a radar gun. So I think it's kind of that way in Putnam County, where they got plenty of law enforcement, and it's not really a high crime area for the most part. If you let kids be kids, the younger law enforcement officers are going to go keep themselves busy if you don't watch carefully. So I think they've had some leadership problems over there, and it probably extended to the health department. And I think there's been some questionable decisions made. Let's see. Where in the Constitution does it say unlimited time or so-called emergency or pandemic? Okay, that was sound minds. Obviously, it doesn't. Our governor, like many governors, have been relying on the emergency powers state statute. And ours is West Virginia Code 15-5-6, I believe. And it doesn't mention a pandemic anywhere in it. It basically allows the governor to create this executive control center to control disaster areas and to suspend laws in order to deal with those disaster zones and to control the occupancy of disaster areas and the flow of people into them or out of them. It says nothing about a pandemic or any sort of statewide state of emergency type deal. But that has been distorted by the governor into declaring a statewide emergency based on there being an imminent disaster, basically, in all 55 counties. And after 6 months, we know that wasn't the case, especially not everywhere. But because nobody's there to stop him, he did it anyways. And so he's been ruling under this sort of provisional government where he gets to do anything and everything. And no one has challenged him. And the legislature doesn't come back to session until February 1st of 2021. Now, when they do, with a simple majority vote, they can terminate the state of emergency. And that's why the governor, who has the ability to call them into session anytime he wants, is not going to call them into session, because they're going to terminate the state of emergency. And then we're back to the form of government that we're supposed to have under our state constitution. So right now we have a government that literally has nothing to do with our state constitution. But our state constitution says that it's always effective. It's never suspended, even in a time of war. But right now it's suspended. And we have a governor that has passed laws all by himself with no legislature. And then we have this one particular county that's run with them and tried to enforce them. So if the legislature itself is not going to stand up and take control of West Virginia, then we have no choice. Just the citizens have to try to do it ourselves. And we tried to do it to the state Supreme Court. For whatever reason, they didn't want to mess with it. So now we're going to the federal courts. And I had wanted to do that. And then boom, they do it in Pennsylvania and they get a big victory. So I'm confident that we can get a victory in federal court and use federal law to strike down these unconstitutional executive orders. So I'll check the website, thecivilrightslawyer.com. That's where the lawsuit can be found in its entirety. And my contact information is there. I'm definitely interested in filing some more lawsuits. I have at least another one in the works. But, I'm only one person as well. So I have a lot of other responsibilities. But if you have any information you think could help, you can contact me at jhb@johnbryanlaw.com is my main email address. Oh, real quickly, what about the school systems? Your question is? Yeah, I mean, the school system, that's just a whole nother video, right? That what should happen with the school systems is, all right, they don't want to open the public schools. What are people going to do? Like they're doing across the country. They're either going to start homeschooling or they're going to go to private schools. But since the teachers unions have been so powerful in West Virginia and are really the last thing standing in between us being an actual real free state, that the teachers unions got the governor to include private schools in his school shutdown scenario. So, the parents can't just take their kids out of the public school system because they're tired of dealing with the crap and send them to a private school, because he's deprived us of the option of going to a competitor. And the public schools, the public school unions, they can't have competition. But that's what we need, is competition. And I read that there are some private schools who are already disobeying the order, and I say good for them. And I think civil disobedience is going to become important here. Disobey and make them enforce it, because it's unenforceable. And if they enforce it, then we can deal with it, or you can deal with it in court after the fact. Okay. All right. And that's about it. Again, jhb@johnbryanlaw.com. And also, go check out this restaurant in Putnam County. From everything I've heard, it's called Bridge Cafe and Bistro. Everybody loves this restaurant unless they have some political axe to grind against it. And again, somebody deleted or hacked, or Facebook deleted or censored their entire page. They had to recreate a new one. But they have their new one, so go make sure that you like their page. Also, make sure that you consider writing in Marshall Wilson for governor, because he's out there every day fighting this very same cause. He was out there and confronted the governor during this recent protest. So check him out too, S. Marshall Wilson. Again, he's a West Virginia delegate who's running as a write-in. Let's see, one more question. Charles Horst, how many businesses have to be destroyed in West Virginia? I think the question is, how many businesses have already been destroyed in West Virginia? West Virginia, this is the one good thing about all of this, is it's calling people's attention to the fact that during the swamp years here in West Virginia, which were most of our history, the mansions of the world, the birds of the world, they created these huge administrative states, and they're full of swamp creatures. And who does it hurt? It hurts the barber, the hair salon owner, who's got to go through 13 or 14 damn different people and all sorts of red tape just to have business every year. They don't do anything. They don't serve them at all. They serve the government. They serve themselves. They create unnecessary red tape. They're a hamper to business. And so they've been hampering business. They've been destroying business for years. And it's time that I think people's eyes have been opened with all this essential and non-essential stuff, that just how little we need from our government. Just get the hell out of our way. I think people have seen that. The barbershop, they don't need some administrative agency in Charleston watching them to make sure that they're safe. They don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need them to go find a barber that doesn't kill me. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, and we all know it. So it's time to see the good in all of this and clean up our state, to reduce the size of government and reduce taxes. Because if we do that, then with more liberty, with more freedom, people they're gonna come here. So thanks for watching, and keep your eye on the civilrightslawyer.com website for updates on this case and possibly other cases.